I'm a believer that this team's going to win the national championships.
The rivalries, it's up there on top of the list, man. And if we allow them to devalue it, we lose a lot of what makes college football special. Don't let them do it. Don't let them devalue what it means to you. And welcome into Juck on Bucks. Appreciate you so much for joining me. Hope you enjoyed your Monday. I sure enjoyed mine. I really enjoyed my Sunday. Caden Dixon-Wyatt, obviously, we came on here live, carried his decision, chose the Buckeyes over the Ducks. You know, it's always funny to me when you see a program win or lose, the reactions of the fan bases. Oregon's been on a little bit of a down streak recently in their recruiting, and they really thought they were going to win that. They had their insiders like Max Torres and Justin Hopkins saying that he was going to pick Oregon. So they were feeling really good about that. They end up losing it, and I started seeing drop the bag. Ohio State dropped the bag. Look, a lot of people use that as a crutch when they lose. Me, I usually point inside. I usually get irritated at the recruiter who lost it, whether it's fair or not. That's my natural reaction. Some, to make themselves feel better, it's the other guy dropped the bag. But I really, really find it funny when it's coming from Oregon or talking about Brian Hartline, as if the best recruiter in college football needs to drop the bag for his fourth wide receiver in the class. That one always gets me good. There are some programs who spend a lot of money on kids coming out of high school. We know what that is. That's fine. If that's what you got to do to get what you need, I respect it. It's within the rules of engagement right now. And I respect programs who do whatever it takes within the rules to win at football, because that's how much I care about it. And I think it would suck to root for a program who didn't feel that way and didn't act that way. But spending a lot of money on kids out of high school carries a lot of risk with it, both financial and the risk of, are you getting kids who really take football as their number one priority, or is it money? It just adds another layer of risk. Ohio State doesn't need to operate that way. 90% of the guys in their classes, they don't operate that way with. There are a few guys that they think can immediately come in and Jeremiah Smith their team, and it doesn't even have to be to that extreme, but you know what I mean. There's a couple of guys in every class that they're willing to go, we're going max deal on this guy because he can come in as a freshman. We're that confident about him. But for 90% of the guys, we're not playing the back and forth game. If you even attempt, we're kind of a little out on you. Oregon doesn't operate that way, and that's fine. You can play it both ways, and you live with what you get. That's what it is. But as someone who gets frustrated at times when Ohio State refuses to pay a little extra, deep down, I know almost in every case it's the right decision. Now, it wasn't with Dylan Stewart, but most of the time, it's always the right decision. They don't want to compromise. They want to know that the guys they're getting value the football first, value the opportunity to come to Ohio State, and are smart enough to understand, look, we're playing the long game here. We're just starting college. This money now is not going to matter when I can make this much money then. And I respect that too. And I respect those kids, and I respect how Ohio State does it. But every program chooses by the rules with which it wants to operate. Ohio State has some advantages other programs don't. The trophy room is one of them. The most first-round picks ever, that's another big one. But on Monday, Oregon lost out again. Another team that doesn't play the drop-the-bag game, that's Georgia and Kirby Smart. Kirby Smart actually handles the budget personally. He handles the negotiations, the financial negotiations personally. We listened to a confidential where a recruit at Georgia talked about Kirby writing a number on a piece of paper, folding it and sliding it over. Could you imagine being 17, sitting in front of Kirby and doing this with him? Like, that would be some intimidating stuff. But most of the programs have their money people do that side of it. They tell them who their priorities are, and they go negotiate, and they bring back to them, here's the situation. We may have to pick between this guy or that guy. We may have to come up on this guy, etc. But Kirby does it himself. But Georgia and Ohio State operate essentially the same way. And they can, because they have that kind of panache to be able to do that. But Georgia just beat Oregon out for the number one quarterback in the country yesterday, and that was Jared Curtis. That's great news that he went to Georgia. So part of my master plan to get Tyler Atkinson, who I think Ohio State right now sits a solid number 2 after Georgia, is if Oregon loses to Georgia, for both Jared Curtis and number one offensive lineman Jackson Cantwell. Because if Georgia takes on Jackson Cantwell and also Jared Curtis, they're going to be stretched really thin budget-wise when it comes to Tyler Atkinson. Tyler Atkinson, one of the guys I think the Buckeyes will go max for. Like, okay, we know this guy can come in and immediately be dominant. So that's part of my master plan there for that to happen. Now, Drew Rosenhaus is Jackson Cantwell's agent, and rumor is he's going to go for about $200 a year, or $2 million a year. $2 million a year. So that one coming up pretty soon as well. And we're going to see if Oregon's able to win that or if Georgia's going to take him to the woodshed twice. But if Georgia is able to win it, going to put a great deal of strain on the budget. And Rusty Mansell, Rusty, the authority on Georgia football, does not think they'll be able to really squeeze Atkinson in that class because they're going to miss out on a lot of other things if they're paying 3 max deals like that in one class. So Atkinson feels better today than it did yesterday. I'll put it like that. As for the Buckeyes recruiting, after losing Albert Hill last week to USC, at this point, I think Jordan Thomas out of Bergen Catholic, cornerback, is one of the 5 most wanted guys on the Buckeyes board. He gets a visit tomorrow from Tim Walton and Matt Patricia. They're going out to see him in New Jersey. And I'm going to tell you, man, if they just keep swinging for a third after they get him, like this could end up being a really great cornerback class, because I think that we've got right now committed one of the most underrated corners in the country in Jacob Weatherspoon. Jordan Thomas, the Buckeyes have always viewed him as a top tier dude. And if you can add Justice Fitzpatrick, that's awesome. But even if you end up with those two, Thomas and Spoon, you're good to go. But he's going to make his decision pretty soon as to when he's going to announce his commitment. So we'll probably see a decision here within the next 3 or 4 weeks. And honestly, Midwest recruitment, Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Notre Dame, and I think this is more Notre Dame, Ohio State at the top. I think it's all but over. I think that the Buckeyes are going to win this now for sure because they can't miss. They can't miss. They know they need him. And if you're telling me that OG Walt knows he needs to win this one, I got my money on him every time. So calling my shot on Jordan Thomas for sure. Now, we talked about the defensive line on the team yesterday, right? So we're talking about all the guys on the team right now. What about in recruiting? Currently, no commits on the defensive line. Some people were very irritated about that. My thought on that was, all right, it's fine right now, even though there are no commits, because all the guys are still on the board. Nobody's committed yet. It's not like they're flying off the board going elsewhere and the Buckeyes are missing. They just haven't chosen. So it was okay. Well, we've got a couple who've now made their decisions, and not for the good guys. The first one, Cam Brooks, out of Georgia last week. He's a guy that I thought for a minute there looked like he was trending Buckeye. I wasn't thrilled about it, but no sweat. He ends up choosing Cal. So he goes out to Cal. One of the guys that I really did like was Derek Coleman-Brusa. Derek Coleman-Brusa was in on all the West Coast. He's from Washington. He had officials scheduled with Washington, Oregon, UCLA, USC, and then Ohio State was his one outside the West Coast. Well, he went ahead and pulled a surprise commitment to Jed Fish in the Washington Huskies, despite having all the Oregon crystal balls. And they just keep on missing lately, man. I don't know what's up with that. But definitely he was a guy that I was looking forward to. So he's off the board. So who is on the Buckeyes board that's got officials committed on the defensive line? We've had some more official visit announcements come out. Let's go through them. Number one, we got Luke Wafle. Boy, I'm all over the place today. Luke Wafle out of New Jersey as well, like Jordan Thomas. Dynamic edge rusher from the Hun School. 4-star, top 100 overall, and I think he's underrated. Built like a brick you-know-what house. He's next level. His film's ridiculous. Really smart kid. Really loves football. Got a brother at Penn State playing football who started at Michigan. It felt like the Bucks were right up there in the top 2, and they still very well could be. But here's what we got. The dude went and visited Texas, and that kind of opened his eyes to Texas. And then Jason Taylor came and talked to him, and now he really was, taken aback by Jason Taylor. Now Miami's on the board. So the waters have muddied, and the board has gotten bigger for him. I think, we've gotten further away from a decision than we were a couple weeks ago with Luke Wafle. Other guys that have got officials to Ohio State scheduled, you just got one come out from Jake Cruel. That one surprised me. Jake Cruel, kind of an undersized edge at 6'2", 220 out of IMG. He's rated close to a 5-star at some services. I think it's more that he really learned his craft young, technically very, very sound, and he beats up a lot of these high school kids with this technique. That doesn't necessarily mean his ceiling isn't as high as some of these other guys, but when I see a guy that's raw, that's beating kids, it's just a little bit of a different feeling than when you see somebody who's beating them with technique, because they don't know how to counter a kid with IMG coaching in high school that's gone to all the camps for 5 years and kind of learned, little tricks of the trade. But big personality, certainly a really good player, and he's locked his officials into Ohio State, Texas, Oklahoma, Colorado, and Florida. His teammate, Preston Carey, this is a big kid. I think this class needs to be full of the biggest dudes you can get inside, right? We're low on them. We need them. They're hard to get in the portal. Starts with Preston Carey, defensive tackle, 6'4.5", 300 pounds, top 300 kid out of IMG. Got officials scheduled now to Ohio State, Georgia, Auburn, Florida, Bama, and USC. That's a lot. We'll see what the Buckeyes can do there. Then you got Cam Brickle, the third kid from IMG this year, coming up for an official. Another 6'2", 300-pounder, Penn State, Ohio State, Texas thus far. And, of course, coming for an official is obviously Deuce Gerald's. Deuce Gerald's at 6'1", 275, I think is another guy that's on the top 5 most wanted for the Buckeyes this year, based on the length of the relationship they've had with him, the caliber of player he is. The non-contact period ended, and the first trip Ryan Day and several assistant coaches took was to go see Deuce Gerald's was one of them. Deuce Gerald's, Braylon Womack, Derek Cooper, the running back over in Florida. But Deuce was on that list, and that's how much they value him. Then we got JJ Perez. That's the kid out of Glenville who kind of got, came out of nowhere, surprise offer recently, 6'4", 360. I don't care if he's a 3-star. Lock that kid up. Number 1, he's from Glenville. Number 2, he's 360 pounds. We'll take him. We need the big dudes. Then you got Jackson Ford out of Malvern, Pennsylvania, 4-star, top 200 kid, 6'4", 240. Wisconsin, Minnesota, Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan for his officials. Carter Lucky, that's another kid from Georgia whose brother goes to Georgia, I believe. He's 6'5", 275, top 300 kid. He's got officials scheduled to Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama, and Ole Miss, and I think FSU as well. So one more, Carter Meadows, 5-star edge, and this one is this is the guy who might be capable of being a top 10 draft pick at 6'6", 215, 5-star, and it looks like it's going to be a Midwest recruitment for him, but it looks like Michigan and Penn State are the 2 teams in the Midwest that are sitting the prettiest right now. So we'll see if the Buckeyes can make a move on him. The Harris twins, who we've talked about forever, but I'm out on them right now. I'm not even watching what they're doing. They said they're going to schedule an official to Ohio State. It's not come yet, and it looks like South Carolina or Auburn are going to be the winners for them. So weird the way that happened, right? But it is what it is. Of course, PJ Dean is also down to Georgia, Ohio State, South Carolina. PJ Dean, now a top 50 player in the country. He's down to 6'5", 255. Used to be a 300-pounder, plays offensive line and defensive line. Looks like the Bucks want him on defense. Tyler Bowen is his lead recruiter listed. It's just a situation where the dude is such a dog. Get him in at all costs. But his film's amazing. Love him. And I think he's leaning Buckeyes. So that's great. Now, that's our recruiting update. Let's get on to some other stuff. And I'm sure you've heard this before. Sherrone Moore suspended. I know you've heard it before because it's the second time since he's been at Michigan he's been suspended. That is now, this will be the third time in a couple of years that the Michigan head coach going to be suspended. In 2023, Jim Harbaugh had 2 separate 3-game suspensions. And as I've said from the start of all this stuff with Michigan, like hypothetical, what is the NCAA going to do with Michigan speculation is not something I do. I think it's boring as hell. It doesn't interest me. It's been going on for over a year. I find the back and forth with Ohio State and Michigan fans about the punishment coming, the hammer not discussion. Like, I find it all just boring. I like to talk about football, but when we got some news, we're going to talk about it here. And while the NCAA is a very poorly run organization that I have very little faith in, I do and always have pushed back on the false narrative that you hear from a lot of people who do shows and they say things like the NCAA is feckless and they have no power. You hear that regurgitated over and over again, and it's simply not true. It is true that the NCAA is powerless and feckless when it comes to enforcing rules that were deemed by the United States Supreme Court as being unconstitutional, which is essentially anything that involves these guys making money or transferring. They don't, or basic, rights afforded to United States citizens. Yeah, the NCAA, they can't enforce rules that they used to have on the books that violated rights. This does not pertain to that. This Michigan thing, nothing to do with that. They absolutely are still enforcing rules against things like cheating. And Kentucky just got dinged. We just saw Michigan get dinged for the Burger Gate. We saw Arizona State get dinged for what the real thing was, for the Burger Gate, which was the COVID dead period. Everybody was told to stop recruiting, shut it down. They found ways around it to try to get an edge. The NCAA is not feckless when it comes to investigations and punishments and other areas of the rule book, and we've seen that recently. Now, I did a show last week discussing Jesse Minter, Steve Klingsdale, former Michigan coaches who had reached an agreement for their recruiting violations, and those recruiting violations were included in the notice of allegations for the advanced scouting scheme. Now, in that episode, I went through the extremely long list of coaches and affiliates under Jim Harbaugh that last couple of years he was at Michigan that had been in legal trouble or let go because of this or that, or received penalties from the NCAA, show causes from the NCAA, suspensions, attempting to persuade players, been fired. It's a long list from Klingsdale to Harbaugh to Partridge to Matt Weiss to Sherrone Moore. More than 50% of Harbaugh's staff. That's not counting the support staff of Denard Robinson and Alex Ude, the dude they hired from Wisconsin that lasted 2 weeks. Sherrone Moore's new defensive line hire. He was going to be really good. Might not even been 2 weeks, but he got 2 DUIs. It's just amazing that you could find so many different things connected to one staff in just a short period of time. And I put that show together and I called it the dirtiest staff that we've ever known about in the history of college football, which is unequivocally true. It's a fact. Now, there may have been some just as dirty, but we did not publicly know about it. You can't find another list of crap like that attached to any one staff in college football history. You just can't. So many different things in one group assembled by one man who was accused and punished by the NCAA for running an organization that fostered an environment of non-compliance. And that's Jim Harbaugh, who got himself suspended twice in his final season at Michigan for 6 total games. And my question at the end of that episode was, how would these fans remember Jim Harbaugh and this regime if they had not cashed in a championship? And the comments I got from the fans, who clearly refused to accept that it is a fact that that is the dirtiest staff ever. I don't know how anybody with a functioning brain could possibly deny that, but they found a way. Much the same way they tried to deflect from what their team did in 2023 by pointing the finger at Ohio State and Ryan Day and secret investigations and RICO charges, which literally came from a Michigan beat writer. But these Michigan fans in my comments, talking about the dirtiest staff in the history of college football, pointed their finger at Jim Tressel and Tattoogate, which is universally laughed at this point. Now, obviously, I'm sure everyone's heard on Monday that it was announced that Michigan head coach Sherrone Moore would be serving a self-imposed suspension, which many of the Michigan faithful is now thinking is the end of the hammer. They were laughing. Oh, this is your big hammer. Poor guys, man. No, this is not the end of it. Michigan head coach Sherrone Moore Michigan self-imposed on him a 2-game suspension, but it won't be like Harbaugh's suspension. Harbaugh was coaching all week, and then he just had to miss the game, go down to Fridays and watch the game. Moore will be suspended for 2 full weeks. And they are self-imposing this because he deleted those 52 messages from Connor Stallions the day that the news broke. The news breaks that day. He erases 52 text messages. Now, those messages were recovered by the NCAA. Don't know specifically what they are, but many of them had to deal with sign stealing, but not with the illegal advanced scouting, which is the issue. His reasoning, he was so mad at Connor Stallions that he would do something like that to those kids that he had to make sure he erased the text messages. Because isn't that what we all do when we're mad at someone? We immediately grab our phone and erase all text messages that we've ever had with that person. We know why he really erased them. It was his reflexive action that there's probably something in there I don't want anybody to see. But he's going to be punished by the NCAA anyway. So Michigan decides, let's go ahead and punish him now, suspend him 2 games, and roll the dice and hope that the NCAA finds that to be an acceptable punishment. But they didn't just choose any 2 weeks. It wasn't week 1 and 2. It was weeks 3 and 4. That's going to be Michigan versus Central Michigan and Michigan versus Nebraska. Central Michigan, of course, the scene of the famous Connor Stallions costume. But why weeks 3 and 4? Why not weeks 1 and 2? Because week 2, they play Oklahoma. Now, they'll say this is because Sherrone Moore was on the Oklahoma team back in the day before he washed out and ended up at Louisville, and it's sentimental for him. How could you deprive him of that, right? But the real reason is that it's a huge matchup with a huge television audience, and they don't want to be embarrassed by not having their head coach on the sidelines 2 years after this scandal that they did nothing wrong for. Oh, and by the way, they self-impose that punishment. That's an admission of guilt. Now, we see programs do this all the time. Usually, we see it when they're self-reporting violations to the NCAA. They self-report a violation. They also report the measure that they took to make sure it wouldn't happen again. And then they tell the NCAA how they self-punished. That's how it goes. The NCAA looks at it and says, we think this punishment is acceptable, or they say, we'd like to see you add this punishment. In this particular case, will the NCAA find that this 2-game punishment is acceptable for Sherrone Moore? Remember, not just any 2 games, though, just the 2 they want. It's like if you self-imposed to your dad when you were a teenager in high school that you wanted to be grounded. You would accept a grounding on Monday through Friday, but Saturday night you would not accept a grounding. I'm self-imposing Monday through Friday, staying in my room, but leave me alone Saturday. I've got a party to go to. So they self-impose that. They also self-imposed a couple years ago a suspension on Jim Harbaugh. That was the Burgergate 3-game suspension that they self-imposed. What did the NCAA think of that one? Well, they thought that it was probably not close to enough, and they went ahead and gave him a 4-year show cause. So it turns out they weren't too close the first time as to what the NCAA wanted on that self-imposition. By the way, Sherrone Moore also got 3 games self-imposed at the same time. This is now his 2nd time. He's a repeat offender. They're self-imposing it, admitting his guilt, and hoping that the 2 games flies. My guess, not going to be good enough. Probably not going to be good enough for a multiple-time violator in 3 years. That is not a good look. And it's really not a good look when he's the head coach of your program after the previous coach just ran off and had charges and verbiage attached to him from the NCAA like he fails to promote a environment of compliance. Now, many Michigan fans really upset. Why aren't they fighting? We wanted them to fight when Tony Petitti was coming after Harbaugh, and he ended up suspending him for 3 games. All the great Michigan lawyers that they have, they said they were going to fight, and then they just gave up. They just gave up and they didn't fight. And now we want them to fight. And they're mad. Like, they did fight. This is their public admission of guilt. This is them tapping out before the arm gets broken. This is the beginning of their public admission of guilt. And this is their plea to dad to let him stay in the room Monday through Friday, but don't ground him Saturday. That's what this is. The fight's over. They lost. Now, there's more to come, and we're going to see more punishments, but we're just waiting to see how big it's going to be. And according to several reports, we're going to know before the season's over or before the season even begins. And to be honest, when it comes to the actual football program, none of the punishments are going to be big enough to make me happy. I want the people involved to have some relevant consequences. And that can't happen because they all scurried out of college football, all except for one stooge. There's one stooge left holding the bag. In fact, the one stooge holding the bag took away the one thing that we would normally hear in this instance when everybody leaves. When everybody leaves and it was a past regime, what they say is, well, you can't punish anybody now. None of these people were a part of it. Well, Ward Manuel makes sure they don't have that defense. Sherrone Moore was absolutely a part of it, and he gave him the head coaching job. Now, at the time, Ward Manuel was so desperate to hold on to the way Harbaugh did things in the winning ways that he had to hire someone off his staff. Total lack of foresight. Hire Sherrone Moore, totally inexperienced. He showed that on the field last year. Not to mention a guy who on the open market, and I said this at the time and got a lot of people angry, would have been a mid-level Big 12 or MAC level head coach on the open market. It's just a fact. That's where he was in his career. That's what he'd have gotten hired for. Instead, he's coaching at a blue blood. And that is how desperate Ward Manuel was to hold on to that and to win the public opinion of the Michigan faithful who hate him. What's bizarre in this whole thing, the biggest problem I personally have, is trying to square the logic with the Michigan man who all my life has held himself in some high esteem with his nose in the air. And this staff and this cast of characters and Connor Stallions calling him a legend while simultaneously telling us he gave them no advantage. The guy that their own head coach said, what type of person would want to do that to these kids? Bo Schembechler would slap the shit out of Connor Stallions, and they call him a legend. Now, I don't hate anybody. One-on-one, I'll talk to any Michigan fan and joke with them and laugh with them, whatever. I don't hate somebody. But a group of people, the idiocy that comes out of this group of people, the contradictions, the finger pointing, the deflection, the suspension of reality. I just could not possibly dislike a group of people more than these people. And I find it so funny as I'm sitting here, a few months off of my team winning a national championship, that they think I'm more concerned that Ohio State lost to them in 24. I'm sorry, guys. I'm a big defender of the rivalry. You won't find a bigger one. But the national championship trumps that game. They call it a Mickey Mouse national championship because it wasn't an undefeated season. Ohio State calls it the greatest run in college football history. We're going to see that every year. No, we're not. In fact, the Mickey Mouse championship was theirs. They beat 3 quality teams. Ohio State beat 6. You're not going to find that. You're not going to find another team that beats 6 of the 8 top teams in 1 year. To do so, you got to have 2 of those wins going into the playoffs. Then you have to have the toughest draw in the playoff field. How many times do you think the team with the toughest draw is going to win? 1 out of every 20 years? They're too stupid to put this together. But yeah, no, that's not going to be done anytime soon. You can bet on that. But their little dork president, by the way, also left. Santo Ono, the guy they were worshiping because he was singing Mr. Brightside and awkwardly trying to hug Jim Harbaugh and tweeting bet. Remember the little dork? He scurried off to Florida. The shortest tenured president that university has had in 200 years. Turns out he was just a grifter. And no, it's not related to football. It's just funny to me that they latched on to that little dweeb like he was one of us because he was singing Mr. Brightside, tweeting out tough guy stuff. And, we love Santo Ono. Yeah, Santo Ono's gone now. He's a Gator. Santo Ono, the Gator. Tried to get Princeton and Harvard. Couldn't do that. And he settled for the next step above Michigan. Florida. Damn, man. Anyway, that's all I got today, guys. I mean, I got a lot more, but I'm raising my voice. I'm too excited. I probably should have done this live so we could chop it up a little more. All right, guys, before I go, I want to show you this picture. What we've got here is the Buckeye receiving and quarterback crew. All the way on your right, we've got Caden Dixon-Wyatt, and he posted this today. To his right, you got Carnell Tate, then Lincoln Keenholz, then you got Nolan Botto. Remember, Nolan was that's the walk-on that Bryson Rogers was telling us when he was on the show. Then you got B.I., Julian, JJ, David Adolph, Mylan Graham, Max Clare, and Chris Henry Jr. But I want you to look in the middle there at Julian Sayin in the gray shirt. It's a Charger shirt. next to BI. Now, BI is a solid 6 foot tall. Who's taller? I rest my case. There we go. And that's what we got. I appreciate you guys. Julian Sayin, a solid 6'1" and change. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Juck Bucks out.